I'm Hannah Cohen, and today I will be doing my cultural assignment on sexuality and sexual education in Scandinavia. I have chosen this topic because my home country, the United States of America, kind of has a notoriously terrible sexual education system from the perspective of people worldwide. One of these factors about the United States that's highly concerning is that 21 states require contraceptives to be covered, while 39 states require abstinence to be covered. Thus, the country promotes an abstinence-based sexual education program, which prevents a lot of young people from properly learning about methods to keep themselves safe when they eventually do encounter sexuality in their lives. Another shocking fact about my home country is that out of the 50 states and DC, only 8 states include a discussion of LGBTQ+ people. Those states include California, Oregon, Nevada, Colorado, Illinois, New Jersey, Hawaii, and Connecticut, which are very, very few. I read a super interesting article called Fishing Naked that goes into depth about the childhood education system that a lot of Danish youth go through. A lot of it encourages open discussion of topics that may confuse them or that they have questions on, and those include topics of sexual education and sexuality. Thus, the Danish have built a reputation for being highly educated in this front, which has led to an interesting set of stereotypes. Ellen Kiethor, a prominent Danish author, goes into depth about how Denmark was the first country to legalize pornography for its users in very early times in the 20th century. The normalization of risque imagery in media, combined with one of the best education systems in the world, has made me believe that the Danish people know a lot about their sexual education and their sexualities. How much does the local population truly know? And is my education that I got taught actually as bad as I believe that it is? My data will be collected through interviews with Danish locals, and the questions will be more open-ended and less scientifically driven due to possible language barriers and language differences in the way that sexual education was taught here. The first section of the interviews will be the science questions. The first question that I will be asking is, if somebody is taking a hormonal contraceptive, is it still important to use condoms? Why or why not? The second question that I will be asking are, what percentage are condoms efficient at preventing pregnancy without any other form of contraceptive? The second question will be about sexuality in Scandinavia, where I will be asking what the first time somebody has been exposed to the LGBTQ community is, what was the outlook on the group of people, and if they identify as part of the LGBTQ community, did they ever feel any shame about it, or were taught to hide this part of their identity by older peer folk around them. Finally, I will be asking Danes their opinion on the Sexy Scandinavia xenostereotype. Do they believe that this stereotype is true to some degree? And overall, what do they think of this stereotype and perception from the outside? Just an important editor's note, everybody that will be on video has consented to being recorded and consented to their information being shared. Okay, on to the interviews.
Interesting.
So I want to start off with just some statistical science questions. So the first question I have is, if someone is taking a hormonal contraceptive, is it still important to use condoms? Why or why not?
Like whether I think it's supposed should be condoms or...
Like if somebody is on birth control or using an IUD, should you still use condoms? Yes or no? And why or why not?
I would be more... Yes, I think I would say yes, just because you can still have other sexual diseases through even sex, even if you have birth control. So I would say both parties should be protected. So yes, I would say it's a condom, definitely.
Awesome.
I think the condom is important because of the risk of I don't know the word, the disease. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I would say the correct answer is because you can prevent STDs.
Exactly, yeah.
The second question I have is, what is the percentage efficiency of condoms of preventing pregnancy without any other form of birth control, just condoms without anything else?
Like 97% or something, isn't it?
97.
Yeah.
90 something? 98?
87.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. On average, it's about 87%.
87?
Yeah.
Okay. That is actually not that high, actually.
You're pretty close.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. What is the first time that you were exposed to the LGBTQ plus community living in Denmark?
I feel like our classes, we've always like had talked about it in class, so it could be more elaborated, but like we always had like discussion of.
You were always talked about it?
Definitely, but meeting it, I think in like high school maybe, I think I made the first like queer people, like queer openly queer, like was when I was like 15, 16 I would say.
You're 15, 16, okay.
That didn't exist at that time.
Okay.
I'm 51.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that didn't exist.
Okay.
Well, and I don't think 18, 19, no.
Yeah, and then my final question is that there's a stereotype about Denmark and Scandinavia in general. It's the sexy Scandinavia stereotype, the Xeno stereotype, and it's where Scandinavians are perceived as more risque than a lot of other countries around the world due to like a more liberal culture and openness with pornographic content.
Definitely.
What's your opinion of this stereotype, and do you believe that there's any truth to it?
I have heard this one before, so that's interesting to hear actually. We were the first country to legalize pornography, so I guess that's where it came from. And I would say people are in general kind of shy, I would say, like as a people. But I will say, I feel like people, especially young people, are quite open talking about sex and talking about, I guess, also like hookup culture and so on. So I guess maybe young people are more inclined to be more like sexual and free, but I would say the older generation is a bit more closed about it. So I'm not too sure I agree on that. I guess I understand where it comes from. I'm put it like that, like this.
The stereotype. No, I don't think I am.
Okay, so you're not aware of the stereotype, but it's like, do you think there's any truth to that stereotype from the outside, or do you think it's just completely a misconception?
Well, I'm not sure of this, what.
Though the actual efficacy on average of condoms is 87%, the hypothetical efficacy of condoms is up to 98%. Danish interviewees answered closer to the hypothetical average than they did the applied average, showing that their education system has a higher focus on strict factual teaching than on applied teaching like the United States does. Though most of the interviewees reported the importance of condoms, one interviewee in particular did not think they were necessary if the other participant was on a hormonal contraceptive. The interviewee was a young man and knew about STDs through his education, but did not believe they were as dangerous as his education made them out to be. Tangentially to this project, there has been a growing concern for the rise of gonorrhea and chlamydia among youth in Denmark, having it be 5 times as high as it was in the 90s. The reason for this rise in STDs, despite a discussion in academic spaces, is unknown, but it may be important to think about for the future. Denmark is considered one of the most LGBTQ-friendly countries in the world. They were the first country to legalize same-sex unions in 1989, and many interviewees felt comfortable discussing their sexuality with their close peers and did not state out loud any shame about their sexuality. Most Danes that I interviewed did not identify as a part of the LGBTQ+ community. They did emphasize their allyship, but kept their discussion of the community hidden throughout their interview. The vagueness of the participants could either be interpreted as 1. Denmark has been accepting of the LGBTQ+ community for so long that in-depth discussions of LGBTQ rights may not be as frequent, or 2. LGBTQ people have light forms of discrimination, but this discrimination is hidden due to Denmark's historically positive reputation of its treatment of its LGBTQ population. As for the sexy Scandinavia stereotype, Danes were incredibly puzzled throughout all of the interviews. They referred instead to a stereotype about the Scandinavian appearance, which is somebody that is typically described as having blonde hair and blue eyes. My home country of the United States of America considers the blonde hair and blue eyes as the beauty standard, as do many other countries. Some Danes believe that the stereotype of blonde hair and blue eyes is a projection of the viewer's form of beauty. The social cognition of the word beauty in the English language could also impact this xenostereotype, as those with English as their second language, like those in Denmark, may not interpret the word beauty as the same as the Danish counterpart. In fact, contrasting the sexy Scandinavia stereotype, many Danes referred to themselves as shy in romantic or sexual scenarios. Young people understood the origins of this stereotype due to the historical connotations surrounding Denmark, such as the early legalization of pornography and the perceived stereotypical beauty of Scandinavians. Many older folk, however, were confused, citing their introvertedness as the reason for their confusion. Thus, there may be a generational divide between the old and the youth regarding Danish stereotypes, which reflects a shift in the culture of sexuality and sexual education in Denmark. In conclusion, sexual education and sexuality in Denmark is not as cut and dry as my narrow American perspective initially made it out to be. The country reflects a unique mix of sexual priorities, interpretation of stereotypes, and a growing shift in the youth culture surrounding sex and sexual education. It may have been interesting to include more old people in my interviews, as well as more men, as many older folk were not apt to be interviewed at all. Perhaps with these additions, a broader discovery of the culture would be found. Overall, despite some slight differences, my hypothesis remains relatively concise about Danish sexual education and sexuality. The education system uses fact-based education to deliver information about safety, sexual diseases, and sexual encounters for its youth. Xenostereotypes of Denmark brought from people like me are not regarded super highly in Denmark and are often confusing and fascinating to Danes more than anything. It is important to recognize that to truly learn about a country and its people, you must make connections with the people themselves and sit down with a nice cozy vibe and have good conversation with them. I have learned so much about the school system and sexuality through these conversations, which can be supplemented by academic texts, but these texts do not reflect the complexity of real conversation found in Denmark. So, sexy Scandinavia, as discussed by Ellen Kiethor, may be a myth, but the Danes and the education system's openness in teaching its population about safe sex and sexuality has led to a fantastically educated discussion that I think we can all learn a little something from. Thank you for watching this cultural assignment, and I hope you learned something new today.